Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Brighton railway station in the south of England is an evocative place with a magnificent curved roof dating back to its opening day, May 11th, 1840. The station has just 8 platforms, but while growing up there, I only ever cared about the ones that led to London. As a teenager, Brighton station meant freedom, heading due north away from the English Channel and into the Big Smoke. I still recall waiting for the clack, clack, clack of the announcement board to fall into position for the fast train to Victoria, King's Cross, St Pancras, or Waterloo. I put my sunglasses on, grabbed my ticket, and ran to the platform, going right to the end, looking for a seat at the front of the train to arrive as soon as possible. After leaving home and going to university, then years later emigrating to America, I rarely returned to Brighton. But when I did, I always took the same route through the town, looking for familiar touchstones and thinking back over the months or years since I was last in that spot. Would you like to take a virtual walk together now? We're going to exit the train station and walk down Queen's Road, turn left where the stone steps join another street below and cut through into the north lanes. Brighton is a place frozen in several particular periods of history. Perhaps best known for the Regency period of the mid-1700s or the Victorian Age, which launched the 2 iron piers stretching out to sea. Immortalized forever by Graham Greene's novel Brighton Rock, published in 1938, the town became known for its gangsters and undercurrent of violence. This I can remember well. As a small child in the early 70s, I can still recall the mods on scooters under psychotropic self-medication in bloody battles with leather-clad rockers on the beach on bank holiday weekends. Yet for me, Brighton will be forever 1987, a time of big hair, frosty pink lipstick, new romantic synth bands, the tail end of punk, and clubs spilling out onto the beach at 2 a.m. But I digress. Perhaps you'd like to know a little more about Brighton's history before I get to mine. Originally a fishing village called Brighthelmstone, documented in the Domesday Book of 1086, a certain local doctor discovered the health benefits of bathing in the freezing sea, and over the centuries that followed, the beau monde flocked to the beach and a prosperous town was established. The most fashionable visitor to these parts, who turned the town into London by the Sea, was King George III's son, the Prince Regent. He used Brighton as an escape, a place to be wild and frivolous out of sight of his father, who was rather preoccupied by America, then still a colony, which was determined to wrest its independence from him and the crown, and did. Deciding to make his home in Brighton until he became the next king, the Prince Regent built the Royal Pavilion, a folly stuffed with artifacts from the opening of the trade routes from India, China, and Japan. The pavilion is now a museum, its birthday cake-like mint green domes and ornate gilded rooms a triumph of whimsy over decorum. Brighton is still rich in Regency edifices from that time, tall, elegant white townhouses set in horseshoe arrangements giving the owners breathtaking views of the sea through huge curved bay windows. The actor-director Laurence Olivier lived in one such house in Sussex Crescent for many years. On my ritualistic walk, each time I returned to the town, I made my way to the North Lanes. I first reached Kensington Street, where Anita Roddick experimented with natural beauty products and launched the global business The Body Shop. I remember her very first store, which opened in 1976. I was still a child, but even then I could see it was unlike anything else. It was exceedingly compact and brought the concept of recycling to Brighton. Later, as a teenager, I would bring back my curvy plastic bottles with the distinctive green and black labels and, at a substantial discount, get a refill of Dewberry shower gel, peppermint foot cream, or delicious gloopy banana hair conditioner. The Body Shop also sold clothes in those days, so my friends and I trooped back and forth to ballet classes in crushed grape velour jumpsuits. Further down the street is Kensington's, which looks like another high-end hair salon today, but in the mid-1980s it was a headquarters for the New Romantic era, staffed by bleach blonde boys in black liquid eyeliner and gender-redefining stylists with too-cool-for-school attitudes. Back then, bands such as the Human League, Depeche Mode, Tears for Fears Culture Club played at club venues in Brighton, bringing with them the club kiddies, the refugees from up north, who came here to study painting at Brighton Art College and had cool asymmetric haircuts from Kensington's. Walking onto the end of Kensington Street, past the outdoor stalls with discount bags of coffee, the smell of incense from the hippie store wafts under my nose. The store windows are full of Buddhas and vials of patchouli oil. On the left is the antique arcade from the 1950s, with some of the original stallholders, nicotine-stained grins, still smoking the same cheap gold packets of Menson and Hedges and talking incessantly to Marge or Doris on the next stall. Still haggling over some sublime piece of Art Deco with a day tripper who thinks they are smarter than these women who have sat here year in, year out, and seen many a visitor from out of town. Let's now leave the North Lanes and continue on. Opposite the Black Lion pub, over there, is the Brighton Museum's old ornate ironwork entrance. There is now a newer, shiny foyer and gift shop on the other side, but I remember this entrance well. Its gates opened with some ceremony to the public at a civilized hour like 10:30. There was a sentry box with a telephone in it for guards to sit and monitor comings and goings. The museum was my first introduction to ultimate glamour. One season when I was a teenager, there was an exhibition of Vionnet evening gowns. The dresses were extraordinary in shades of shimmering cream, ice blue, and palest ballet slipper, pink satin, cut skillfully on the bias. Looking at them, I was transported into another world of possibilities. Upstairs at the museum is, or was, a long balcony cafe overlooking the main gallery. Sipping milky cups of tea in delicate bone china and eating crumbly scones, I used to ponder the lives of women who wore Chanel. I never had the nerve, but I used to dream of creeping into the museum in the early hours of the morning, taking off my huge black sweater and slipping into a cool, long black silk shift and pearls, and dashing off for the weekend to a 1930s cocktail party, hosted by Noel Coward at some terribly eccentric English country house. Strolling on now through the pavilion's gardens, now restored to their original concentric lawns design, through the gate given by India in Queen Victoria's reign, and to the original Regency lanes. Tiny, twisted streets, barely one person wide, with tempting windows full of glittering heirlooms in antique stores, jewelry establishments with silver hope rings on red velvet cushions, lavender sachets hung on silk in a basket in the apothecaries, kiss-me-quick cards with buxom couples leering from the newsagent's spiral display. Suddenly, emerging from the lanes, there is the first glimpse of the sea. Brooding, massive, vast clouds, encased by faded pale green railings, and lit up by twinkling lights of fairground rides on the end of the pier. A few green and white striped deck chairs, their canvas blown out by the wind, sit hopefully on the pebbled beach. In the midst of a brutal winter, it always seemed impossible that by mid-August, for one hot weekend, you couldn't see the pebbles for the lobster-red English sunbathers. Back in the lanes is the reject shop. At 16, maybe earlier, I had a Saturday job at a shoe shop, and this was the store, the reject shop, where I planned my future apartments, in glorious shades of camel, blonde cashmere throws, and huge, squishy suede couches. Then slightly later, every Saturday lunchtime, on my lunch break from my weekend job in the shoe department at Miss Selfridge's, I would browse the shelves, fantasy shopping. Floaty drapes for my bedroom, a broad white enamel serving platter to be heaped high with something sophisticated for suppers with friends, and a fashionable coffee percolator. I pictured my future self on a terrace, surrounded by earthenware plant pots, listening to Mahler. In the summer of '87, I worked at a restaurant called Crusts, around the corner from the reject shop. It was a world of flirting, gossip, and intrigue. Beautiful, crazy, androgynous fine art students working in the kitchen, crashing in their houses after clubbing all night and walking home at 4 a.m. along the seafront, wearing a thin cotton dress, Dr. Martens, and a denim jacket from a second-hand market stall. Back then, never noticing the bitter wind coming off the beach, rushing in the next day, late again, to set up the wooden tables with wax candles jammed into old wine bottles. After our shifts finish, we would rush across the road to the cocktail bar downstairs and talk until dawn on the curb outside. I'm not sure I've told this to anyone before, but I always wanted to work at Brown's, not Crusts. Brown's is very different now, but in the 1980s, the really glamorous people worked there. They wore crisp white shirts, probably made by Joseph or another extremely chic outfitter, and slim black trousers. I believe they also had a white apron tied very tightly around the torso. Hair was luscious, piled on top in a loose devil-may-care chignon or something shiny and sleek, a black bob, or 1930s era Oxford University aesthete look. Whatever it was, I didn't have it, not back then. When I left Brighton in 1988 to go to London University, I came back once and got a job at Crust the summer after I turned 20. I rented a small house next to the Duke of York cinema, which showed classic French films like Diva, Betty Blue, and Bout de Souffle. In those days, you could smoke in the upper balcony, and I sat transfixed at the screen in a cloud of cigarette smoke with my new Vidal Sassoon Black Louise Brooks bob, my nose now pierced, and a shocking set of recently acquired wild and destructive behaviors. I imagined myself in love with everyone that summer. We tripped out to acid jazz, spent hours talking in cafes, and sitting in my tiny walled garden, eating pasta, taking long walks on the beach, and making a pact to do something, just something extraordinary with our lives before we turned 30. But by the time I was 27, I no longer wanted to return to Brighton, and I stayed away for many years. When I finally returned that first time, I took the same slow walk from the railway station to the sea. I always end up at the sea next to the pier. There's only one pier left now, the original West Pier, which opened in 1866, closed 109 years later, and finally fell into the sea. So on that first visit back, I walked the length of the Palace Pier, which opened in 1899. I ordered a coffee, and I found somewhere to sit, near the fun fair and the dodgems where I got my first bloody nose, and leaned over the ironwork railings. I looked out to sea, just as I did when I was a teenager, looking out towards America, where I now live.